What's up, everybody, and back to another episode. We are uh, unpacking this chapter, Deuteronomy 28, looking at verses 15 through 68, more importantly, verses 29 through 68, and we are continuing our study of the covenant consequences. The children of Israel were given the option of being obedient in verses 1 through 14. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 through 14. God told the children of Israel, if you are obedient, then you will receive the blessings of God. But if you are disobedient, he says that we would receive the curses. And today we are receiving the curses that are outlined in verses 29, specifically verses 29 through 68. And so we are picking up where we left off in our previous lesson. We are now looking at verse 41. In verse 41 of Deuteronomy chapter 28, it says, "You shall beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be yours, for they shall go into captivity. You shall beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be yours, for they shall go into captivity." And this what's interesting is that not only is this being fulfilled today, but this was being fulfilled many years ago. What do I mean? Let me give you an example. Let's look at some historical proof. Let's look at some historical proof because it's always important to not just take my word. Now we can look at what is going on in our country right now, but we can also look at some historical proof that gives us more to validate, more reasons to more things to validate, more proof to validate what we're saying and what the Bible is saying. So this is in the book, The Jews of Spain and Portugal and the Inquisition. The Jews of Spain and Portugal and the Inquisition. And this is on, let's see, page 57. And I'm going to read, let's see, I'll start in the beginning of this paragraph. Unfortunately, at the time of the expulsion, the plague was raging in Castile, and the fugitives brought with them the disease, propagating it wherever they went, and not unnaturally causing their advent to be viewed with loathing and horror. This circumstance induced King John to hasten their departure from Portugal, for which purpose, meaning the Jews from Portugal, for which purpose ships were duly provided according to the agreement, but such was the temper of the captains and sailors that they subjected the Jews to the hardest possible conditions. They plundered them of their goods and valuables, even to their very clothes, and landed them naked and bare of everything on barren points of the African coast, leaving them to die of starvation or to be sold into slavery to the Moors. Nor was this all. The king wrested from their parents all children between the ages of 3 and 10 of those Jewish immigrants who from poverty or otherwise had omitted to pay the capitation tax on entering or who were forced to remain in Portugal, and had them transported to the newly discovered islands of St. Thomas, which then swarm with alligators and other beasts of prey, to be brought up as Christians. And so this was not in during the transatlantic slave trade, but this was some time later when some of the Hebrews had migrated. They had made their way to Portugal and Spain, and so during this time, some of them had also been taken into. Uh, they were deported from that country, and it says that their children were taken and they were brought up as Christians. Let's look at another example. This is in the book. Let's see, what book is this? Uh, this one is Portuguese Exploration to the West and the Formation of Brazil. And this is on page, is this one page? Not page 17, page 17. Now, what's interesting is this is talking about the same incident. It says, by the year 1470, the Portuguese had found the equatorial island of Sao Tome in the Guinean Gulf off the African coast. Sao Tome is an African country. The climate proved to be extremely unwholesome for Europeans and settlement was slow. The official chronicler of King Jao II, Garcia de Resende, reports on one of the methods to populate this island that also throws some light on a tragic form of Jewish participation in the Portuguese Atlantic Empire. The king had allowed Jewish refugees from Spain, from where they had been expelled in 1492, to remain in Portugal only in return for payment of an enormous ransom. That's what we just read in the last resource. In 1493, those who could not pay had their children taken away from them, baptized by force, and deported to Sao Tome in order to be raised as Christians and to help populate the island that the king had just leased to Alvaro de Caminha at an annual rent of 100,000 reis. Nothing is known of their further fate, although later chroniclers attribute the thriving sugar production on the island to the talents of these deported children and their offspring. Have mercy. But there's more. There's more. In the book America, being the latest and most accurate description of the New World, this says, and this is going to be, if you're not familiar, if you've never read this before, this kind of writing, then it's going to be hard to understand or better yet to read. But some of the F's, they made their F's like, they made their S's like F's for some reason, I don't know. But it says the Portuguese that dwelt on this island, I'm sorry, I'm on page 5, no, is this 574, I believe? Yes, 574. The Portuguese that dwelt on this island informed the Netherlanders that few lived about 50 years there. Yet notwithstanding the great gain tempted them to tarry, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in the sugar mills, that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before, whom thou, the unwholesome heir, destroyed, yet the place was not left desolate. For he sent new inhabitants, who first settled in Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be the better used to the heir, that the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion and caused their children to be baptized, from whom coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descended. Have mercy. And so we are seeing, or we saw, better yet, that even history proves that our children would be taken from us, that we would never see them again. We would never see them again. This thing is, I mean, this is crazy when you look at the Bible, and you read these things that Moses said what happened. Moses said what happened to the children of Israel, and then when you look at history, and history lines up exactly with what happened. The prophecy resonates with the historical experiences of the Jewish communities in Spain and Portugal during the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. In the late 15th century, which we just saw, Jews faced severe persecution, forced conversions, and expulsions. A particularly harrowing event was the abduction of their children. In 1493, King John II of Portugal ordered the deportation of approximately 2,000 Jewish children to the island of Sao Tome off the west coast of Africa. These children were forcibly taken from their parents and sent to a remote and hostile environment where many perished due to harsh conditions. Have mercy. Have mercy. And so the Bible is, the better yet, history is clear. And so During the slave trade, we saw separation. Later on in the 15th century, we saw the same thing. We saw separation. And today we see the same thing. Our families are being torn apart. Our children are being taken away. Foster care, all of these other different things that are happening to our children. And we are seeing once again that prophecy is being fulfilled. Prophecy is being fulfilled and has been fulfilled. The Bible goes on to say in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 41, verse 43, Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 43. Let's read that here. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 43. It says, "The alien or the foreigner who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. He shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail." Have mercy. If that's not what we are seeing right now happening in our communities, if you think about what's going on in our communities right now, uh, we are we are definitely the tail and not the head. We see all of these other communities, all of these other ethnic groups that are coming into our communities. They are buying up land. They are buying up businesses. They are creating businesses, and uh, we oftentimes don't have businesses in our own communities. And so you have the Asians. They own what the liquor stores and the laundromats and the carryouts. I'm from the north, so we say carryout. You know. Then you have the Arabs. They have the gas stations. And so everybody's buying up property. Everybody owns a property in our neighborhoods, owns businesses in our neighborhoods, but we don't own any of it. Everybody comes into our neighborhoods and profits, but we don't profit off of any of. We don't profit at all. The wealth gap in this country continues to grow. The median wealth of our European brethren, their families are the wealth gap is 10. They have more than 10 times the amount of wealth that our families have. 10 times. That is crazy. Now understand that the reason why they have as much wealth is because, they started off on third base. We started off on home. They started off on third base. We started off on home. I remember I was having, I dropped my kids off at school, and we see um, these Europeans, and they're driving the nice cars, and they spending money they go to our children go to a private school, just like many of these individuals do. And I've explained it to my children that, listen, your parents, my wife is a doctor of physical therapy. I'm a pastor. We don't make a whole lot of money, but we make decent money. Uh, and I've explained it to my children that, listen, the only difference between, you know, your family and their family is the fact that they started on third base. Many of them don't make more than what we make, but they started off with more. So they started off not being in debt. They started off with hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. In most of our families, we start off, broke. And when we go to school, we have to go into debt to get into school. We have to go get student loans and all of these other things. And so we see this massive wealth gap. And of course, we know that because we make less than our European counterparts. And so all of this contributes to the fact that the wealth gap continues to close, and the alien, the foreigner. We have these, even our Hispanic or Latino brethren. They come in and they start businesses as well. They start businesses, and for the most part, they are coming up higher and higher, and have, to be honest, in many cases have surpassed us. Have surpassed us. And why is that? It's because prophecy has to be fulfilled. We are experiencing the effects of prophecy being fulfilled in Deuteronomy 28. We're going to end on that note. If you have not done so, please like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next video where we continue to unpack